Yes, hello and welcome YouTubers and Doctor Who fanatics to another Big Finish audio review. And today we'll be taking a look at one of the newer releases from this month, August 2021. After the Daleks, from the Early Adventures range. And yes, I'm back after 5 or 6 months. And there'll probably be 5 or 6 months into the next video. Actually no, that isn't true because I will be reviewing the Secrets of Det-Sen as well. I said this before and I'll say it again, the Early Adventures range is quite overlooked in my opinion. Not too many people lay their eyes on the range. Though, I would be fair, this isn't really my personal opinion, I'm mainly grabbing this from like the general opinion that it seems like it's grabbing people's attention now. Especially with this season of the Early Adventures with After the Daleks and the Secrets of Det-Sen, which is the release I'm looking forward to with the two of them. But we're not reviewing that one today, it's After the Daleks by Roland Moore. They're being a little bit more experimental with more like prequels and sequels, continuations, setting of events to The Abominable Snowman with the Secrets of Det-Sen, and then a continuation of the Dalek occupation of Earth, the Dalek Invasion of Earth. A continuation of the Daleks Invasion of Earth. This is not a unique idea, it's been done before in the extended media, before even by Big Finish, but you should know as well, my viewers, Legacy of the Daleks has done the same thing. And there is actually like parallels, and what I mean by parallels, it's just similarities between those two stories, like similar elements and story ideas, especially with a political figure trying to maliciously gain power. In Legacy of the Daleks, it was Lord Harridan, something like that, if my memory serves me correctly. And in After the Daleks, it's a man named Marcus. Now, what did I think about After the Daleks by Roland Moore? I will be honest about this writer, because I have experienced a few of his stories. The most recent one, not including After the Daleks, is Colony of Fear, which was the one, it wasn't the penultimate, it was the one before in the monthly range. And it was good, but it did outstay its welcome. And that's been a very common opinion of me of Roland Moore. Great writer. He has some great ideas with his stories. I can definitely say that with Colony of Fear. But the whole story itself from start to finish, I will admit, it does outstay its welcome. So I was saying to myself, well, After the Daleks do the same thing. Now, my honest opinion on After the Daleks, it's not what you imagine it to be or what you expect from it. You're already expecting, it's going to be a Dalek story, a continuation of the Dalek Invasion of Earth. So what do you get out of it? Do you get the Daleks taking a counter-offensive to reclaim the Earth? No. Is it a single Dalek episode where we see one lone Dalek have power and influence over people, which I think it's lone Dalek episodes have been some of the best Dalek episodes of all time, and I mean the entirety of Doctor Who, not just television. No. And I would admit I was kind of expecting that from After Daleks. That's kind of what I wanted, but that is not what you get here. I wouldn't even don't expect this to be a Dalek story, because it isn't. I wouldn't even call it a Dalek light story. It's not a Dalek story. The bio, it kind of fibs a little bit, where this is one single Dalek. But yeah, it's the bio, the back when you read it, it's kind of a fib. After Daleks really is a political romp, a political back and forward, really between Marcus and Susan, and depict it however you want. If it's good versus evil, liberty over corruption, or honesty against deception. It's basically what it is. But when you begin part one, it flows wonderful when you've experienced and watched the Dalek Invasion of Earth. You can watch the Dalek Invasion of Earth and go straight to After the Daleks to treat it like some 10-part epic story. And yeah, it did flow into After the Dalek Invasion of Earth quite well. So yeah, they did well in that. It shows the TARDIS dematerializing with Susan in that scene. I think it would have kind of been nice if someone like Peter Purvis narrated the Doctor's voice, saying the speech, which we all are familiar with, I think that would have been quite effective in the story. Just a bit of homage and nostalgia, but that isn't there. But it doesn't really need to, because it does its job. It flows nicely as a continuation from the Dalek Invasion of Earth, from the cliffhanger at the end of the Dalek Invasion of Earth. But in terms of Daleks, I think I should just make this known, because I think people will just not imagine what the story's going to be correctly. They're just going to depict it in another way. As I said before, and as I stated, this is not a Dalek story. It isn't at all. There's only one Dalek in the story, and he appears for moments in episode 1. And then there's no sight of any Daleks besides a computer terminal, and that's it. So I would say that's something you have to be aware of if you want to pick up the story, because you will end up probably being disappointed. I've seen a few reviews at the moment, and that's something common which I've seen, is people didn't expect it the way it was and what it turned out to be, a political back and forward romp. Because that's what happened to me. I kind of wanted a single Dalek episode of showing how capable one single Dalek is, and I think they're some of the best Dalek stories of all time. Just look at Dalek. Part 1 is depicted in this warehouse where they're trying to help the Robomen from their conditions. Susan describes them as brain-dead zombies with no purpose. Their purpose was completely taken away from them by the Daleks, and they remain quite unsuccessful trying to reverse their conditions. And that plays on quite a big subplot involving Jenny Campbell, and her brother Victor, who is a Roboman. Even with little to no Dalek influence in this world depicted in After the Daleks, it's still very miserable, very bleak, and very corrupt. And Susan kind of makes the statement that the world isn't great, even with no Dalek influence or no Daleks in the background or anything. It's still miserable, it's still depressing, it's still bleak. And she kind of questions the whole, did I stay here for the right reasons? Is this truly home for me? Did I do the right thing? Should I have had the idea of bringing David into the TARDIS and joining the TARDIS team? All that comes into play. But yeah, we just see basic human nature, especially from Marcus, of greed, ambition, of jealousy to rise to the top of power, and does any means necessary to get to it, even if it involves thousands of deaths, if it's through political manipulation and lying to the survivors, and to frame Susan, and to even pretend he's done good in the world, even though he hasn't. He's a massive coward. I actually hate the character, but that's literally the entire point. You're supposed to hate him. And my, is he just a big, massive coward. You can see Marcus is one of these, he's always on the winning side. He's never faithful to one side. He's just basically serving his own purpose. He did work with the Daleks originally during the occupation, but then after, it was more of a ploy to survive. That's basically why he did it. And he turned out to be the only survivor in government, a political figure, so he has experience. So he was going to use that as a tool to gain the position of power, but not really through democratic ways. He's an autocrat. He believes in one person ruling over others. And he kind of reminds me of Stalin a little bit, especially when he says Susan is an enemy of the state. Yeah, send them to the gulags. But yeah, Susan's more, I would use the word assertive, more facing the action and facing danger. That really links well to when the Doctor says you're now a woman, a grown woman, no longer a child. So that characterization from start to finish of Susan's journey through the era of the show, that was done really good. It feels right, the characterization, that she's independent and grown up and doesn't need the Doctor. We see David Campbell and Jenny try to set up a democratic system to put people in various roles where they're suited and where their expertise come from. But then we see Marcus doing his little ploy, his little mind games and manipulation and stuff, who's pretending that he cares about making a democratic system, because yes, he is an autocratic lunatic. The way he kind of plays Susan, that he was the destroyer of the Daleks and not her and the Doctor, and by basically forcing the Dalek to lie, because the Dalek is injured and on the brink of death basically, so they try to do a bargain, Marcus and the surviving Dalek of Dalek Invasion of Earth. Which, there's quite a funny line which comes up where Marcus says, "Now why would a Dalek lie?" Now if I know the Daleks lie all the goddamn time. Because they are pretty good at manipulation, the Daleks. Overall, part 1 I think is pretty solid. And I would say it's the best part of the whole story. It's engaging, it never lets off any momentum. The drive and the pacing is just fantastic. And from part 1 alone, I would rate it a 9 out of 10. It was just so gripping to me, and I loved it. I loved what they were trying to do with it. It's not, again, it doesn't turn out how it's supposed to, or what I want it to turn out. It could have been a predictable way of doing it, but I don't really care. I kind of wanted the Dalek to be the main focus point of one single Dalek trying to manipulate. And it turns around on Marcus being the one manipulated by the Dalek, but it doesn't turn out that way. After this, no more Daleks. Just a computer terminal and that's it. Part 2. This part, the story itself, like the plot, it stays stagnant. It doesn't really progress. It's more this political back and forward with Susan and Marcus. Susan doesn't really want to be a leader. It's not really in her nature. And that's just for people. Some people just don't have a mind for logistics or a mind to govern. Some people just don't have it. It's a character trait. But she believes that she has to do it, and David Campbell sort of reassures and pushes Susan to do it, because Marcus is a two-faced asshole. And he's corrupt, and he killed thousands of people just to save his own skin. So he's not a good person at all. He's practically evil and a coward. So that's why Susan does it and listens to David's wisdom on it. So, and they listen to each other. So their characterization, Susan and David Campbell, is good. I like that. And yeah, Susan directly challenges Marcus when they have a little face-to-face. When she tried to expose him of sending a looter, they think it's an assassin sent by Marcus to get rid of political rivals, basically. And Marcus kind of boasts that, well, I'm going to win regardless, so why would I send someone after you? So he's kind of playing mind games a little bit, but you know his character, as I said multiple times, he's a coward. So he does play the manipulation games a lot. But when I was looking at episode 2 with this political back and forward, and it happens a lot in episode 3, along with the subplot with Victor being the Robo-Man, trying to be, fix his condition. This story is very basic. There's not a lot in it. When I was dissecting it and doing the review, it's there was actually not too much going on in this story. The main plot is really just this political romp with Susan and Marcus trying to convince the survivors of, well, they should be the one to lead, and trying to expose each other. Marcus through by fabricating stuff. But yeah, it's very basic, especially when I compare it to Legacy of the Daleks. There's I know there's a lot of fan wanking in that book, I will admit, but yeah, there's not a lot in it. So it's a very basic story. That doesn't mean it's necessarily bad. I wouldn't say that, but if it doesn't have a lot of weight to it, a story, if it's kind of monotonous in tone with the plot, then that doesn't really convince me that I'm going to give it a high rating. Very similar to Colony of Fear, I had the same problem with it. It had good ideas in it. I love the ideas. There was a good idea in After the Daleks 2 with slime, which makes you see memories which are either real or just false fabrications as well, just fabricated visions. And that plays a part of the story quite a bit. I won't reveal anything else about that orange slime. Yeah, part 2 is, it's okay. I would say it's okay. It's pretty much, as I say, just a back and forward political romp. Part 3 is pretty much the same as part 2. And this is where we see the autocratic side of Marcus now, where he declares Susan to be an enemy of the state. So very he spouts a lot of fascistic ideology. He does. He also tries to convince the survivors of very anti-alien rhetoric. So, and tries to put this out in every single corner possible, like radio, surviving camps, the warehouses where they're trying to fix the Roadmen, so everybody basically, to try and sway the public opinion on Susan and aliens in general, because he's trying to convince that Susan is an alien, and she admits it as well, that she's a time-traveling alien. And since aliens, the Daleks, were responsible in the destruction of the planet almost, why would they trust Susan even though she's an alien? With his anti-alien rhetoric, which he's trying to push. And this is the episode where we find out that Marcus is responsible for thousands of deaths just to save his own damn skin. He has no allegiance to anybody. You can see he switches sides all the time, he does. In the Dalek Invasion of Earth, he wasn't on screen obviously. He was on the Dalek side to save his own skin. In the beginning of After the Daleks, he's on the people's side, but not really. And then at the end, he's back on the Dalek side. So, yeah, this guy's all over the place. There's a nice little teaser with Ian and Barbara in the story, or what happened to them after they arrived at the end of the chase, when they returned to London, England, in 1968. So it throws us a few teasers and stuff around there. I don't think I need to go into that. That's just more for the listeners. Yeah, it's still like part 2 and 3 for me. Still like part 2 and 3. It's what I've said over and over again. It's a political story, back and forward, back and forward, back and forward. And that's when I say it outstays its welcome. Part 1 was flipping amazing. I love part 1. I was a 9 out of 10. I was so engrossed with it. But then I think it turned into something which I didn't want it to turn into. And I think from being this political romp from part 2 to part 4, yeah, it outstayed its welcome. Okay? Maybe you might dig it, but I was on the fence with it. It outstayed its welcome. Marcus is a good villain. The story does with him what it's supposed to do. You're supposed to hate him because he's a coward and a manipulator, because manipulators are cowards, and it does that perfectly. He's a great villain, and I would say the star of the show, the best character performances to go to him, in my opinion. I love/hated his character. Yeah, it's a good story. It's definitely not one which I would write home about. It seems like popular stories which build up a lot of hype this year somehow didn't do it for me. It's strange, isn't it? Because I had that with Return of the Cybermen, and it seems that one is extremely divided. It's some people love it and then some people don't, and I'm on the side which I don't, and I gave it might have been a harsh rating, but it was just my thoughts, and I was saying I stand by it. But this one isn't as on the lines of Return of the Cybermen, because I think that gets a lot of things wrong. But After the Daleks it's a quite good story. I wouldn't rave about it. I give it a 6 out of 10. It's above average. It's an above average story for me, and that's why it gets a 6 out of 10. And I give Colony of Fear the exact same rating, 6 out of 10. It seems that Roland Moore only gets 6 out of 10s from me, so sorry, Roland Moore. He's got some fantastic ideas, don't get me wrong. But maybe I'm just not a fan of them. Maybe that's just it with me. We all have our tastes, don't we? I got Stephen King up in the top, but I know people who are not a fan of it. It's just people have tastes, and that's what it is. So thanks for watching my review of After Daleks. I won't disappear for 6 months from this video because I will be reviewing The Secrets of Det-Sen. I actually can't remember who wrote that one. So see you in that review.